know for sure which clubs are interested in signing him, but he's arguably the best goalkeeper in the world. Who's better than him? Maybe Alisson at Liverpool at the moment. But there are reports that clubs like Manchester City are interested in signing him, clubs like Manchester United as well, although I think that would be difficult to see happening because he is on big, big wages. The background to this is that he moved to PSG as a free agent 4 years ago. You remember, he was represented by Mino Raiola at the time. He was the best goalkeeper in the world. PSG, because they weren't paying a transfer fee for him, broke the bank almost, although it's difficult to break the bank when you're PSG, to pay his wages. Now his contract is going to run out next summer. There have been talks about a new deal, but I don't think PSG want to pay the kind of money that perhaps the player feels that he is worth. And also, PSG don't want to be in the situation anymore where players are leaving and free transfers. Remember that whole saga
we all remember
with Kylian Mbappe as well. Once bitten, twice shy. So I think what they've done is gone out and bought a new goalkeeper, Lucas Chevalier, for 40 million euros. They've said to Lucas Chevalier, you're the number one. Donnarumma is not even in the squad for the Super Cup game against Tottenham. All parties are trying to work to find him a new club. But of course, it's going to be very, very difficult because he's arguably the best goalkeeper in the world and he's on big, big wages. And he always has the option of just saying, you know what, I'm not going anywhere. I've got this big contract. I like my life in Paris.
Not doing that in the World Cup year.
Well,
not doing it.
I agree with you. I agree with you. How could Italy's number one goalkeeper not play at all in a World Cup year? But he does have that option. But it looks like he's not going to play for PSG again. And it's quite an incredible turnaround because just a few months ago, he was winning the Champions League in spectacular fashion as one of the key players in that brilliant PSG side.
Top goalkeeper. There won't be short of suitors. What about Alejandro Garnacho? Has he got lots of suitors?
Well, it looks like one in particular. Napoli were interested in signing him in January and they had interest in the summer. They've moved on to other targets. But Chelsea, that's been a long-standing interest. There were conversations that took place in January. Things have stepped up now. There's talks ongoing now between Chelsea and Manchester United. And this is a really important deal that United get right because they've been really active in the transfer market in terms of bringing in players. Now the priority is selling players. Alejandro Garnacho would represent pure profit from a profit and sustainability perspective. Previously, they were looking for around 70, 60 million pounds. I'm unsure they're going to get that right now because of a number of conditions. The fact he's been frozen out of the first-team picture. He's not training with the first-team squad. I know Ruben Amorim says he'll be reintegrated if there isn't the market value met by a club like Chelsea. But also, Ruben Amorim said that Garnacho was looking for a new type of leader. He's looking for a new type of project. So you'd expect him to depart. Chelsea, yes, they have a number of wide players, but all these different wide players have a specific profile as well. We know Garnacho is a very, very talented player. Perhaps he needs the right manager and the right club. So I think this is a deal that could happen. Chelsea want to try and sign him before the end of this transfer window. I think he will depart before the end of this transfer window. I think he'll probably head to Chelsea as well.
OK, so you think Garnacho on the way out. Are Manchester United going to get Carlos Baleba in?
I still think this is a very difficult deal for Manchester United to do for a number of reasons. They've spent a huge amount of money replenishing their front line, but their next priority is signing a central midfielder if they can. The reason why this is difficult is because United do need to prioritise sales. So far, there's not been a huge amount brought in. Yes, there's been the sell-on clause of the likes of Anthony Elanga. They've probably made around £20 million in terms of things like that, but unless they can get £40 million for Rasmus Højlund, they can get a good deal for Anthony, they can get a good deal for Jadon Sancho, they're not really going to be in a situation where they can really attack this transfer and bring in Carlos Baleba. The other factor is Brighton, they're not going to sell him on the cheap. He's arguably as good as Moises Caicedo was at that stage when Chelsea spent £150 million on him. Maybe not quite as ready as Caicedo, but you can understand the sort of figures that Brighton will be looking at for Carlos Baleba to depart. You wouldn't expect it to be anywhere short of £70, £80 million. So for United to go after that, they need to do a lot of work in terms of outgoings over the course of the next few weeks.
Well,
I think it's going to be too problematic.
Are they going to get the famous five? Are they going to close the book on the famous five?
I think Jadon Sancho, they'll find an exit for him. I think it's going to be difficult to do a permanent deal, I think. But Borussia Dortmund are a club that are exploring the conditions of doing another deal to bring him in. I'm not sure whether or not they'll be able to get a permanent transfer for Jadon Sancho. But he's got 1 year left in his contract. There's the option of another year. So United could look to do something like a loan with an obligation to buy. Of course, they'll do a loan, but if there's a permanent element, Anthony, Real Betis want to try to sign him. They're looking at a loan. They don't think they can find the finances to do a permanent deal. But of course, as we've spoken about all transfer window, as we get closer and closer to the deadline, there will need to be compromises when it comes to the player and the club as well. So United may have to take much less money than they wanted in June, what they will take on the 1st of September to get rid of these players. Malacia, slightly different, I think, because of his injury record. I think that's going to be very difficult. Rasmus Højlund, they can get £40 million for him, then that would represent not too much of a loss. His book value right now is around £45 million. They signed him for around £70 million a couple of years ago. AC Milan in talks. I think if they could get rid of Højlund and Garnacho for around £80 million and they can get something like £20 million for Anthony, maybe 15 for Sancho, then that would represent good business. United haven't sold well over the course of the last few years. They need to sell well now if they're going to attack the rest of this transfer window.
Carve.
So Donnarumma has to leave Paris Saint-Germain. We will see if it's going to be this summer or next summer on a free, but Donnarumma has to leave Paris Saint-Germain because the relationship is completely gone. Donnarumma is not in the squad for the Super Cup. Donnarumma is super sad and disappointed. Very soon Donnarumma will talk. We speak in public and will make PSG fans feel his disappointment. And he was one of the heroes of the Champions League, and then he ends up not even on the bench for the Super Cup. No agreement on the contract, and so this is Paris Saint-Germain position. You don't extend the contract, well, you are out of the squad. So this is the two different positions on this story. What about Donnarumma? I can reveal to you that 24 hours ago, it was on Monday, there was a direct contact between Manchester City and Paris Saint-Germain. The two sides spoke about Donnarumma. The answer from Paris Saint-Germain is an initial price of 50 million euros. Man City will never pay that, because they believe that the player is out of PSG projects with 1 year left on his contract and on a big salary. The price should be way less than this, way less than 50. So let's see if the two sides, Man City and PSG, can find a solution. They have a very good relationship, Manchester City and Paris Saint-Germain, so they can try to find a solution. But this Donnarumma Manchester City deal will only happen in one case, and in that case is that Ederson has to leave the club. Ederson has to go. So if Ederson leaves and if Man City can reach an agreement with PSG on a reasonable price for Gianluigi Donnarumma, in that case, the Donnarumma deal can happen. Otherwise, the deal is not happening. Who is interested in Ederson? Galatasaray from Turkey. They are really concrete. They are talking to Manchester City, talking to the agents of Ederson, trying to reach an agreement for the Brazilian goalkeeper, and in that case, Donnarumma could really go to Manchester City. Why Manchester City? Because Pep Guardiola is a big fan of Donnarumma, considers Donnarumma one of the best goalkeepers in the world, and also because Donnarumma is quite keen on a move to Premier League. But again, this deal will only happen in two cases. Agreement with PSG, and it's not going to be 50, but I think not even 40, but I think not even 35 million euros, according to my information, and then Ederson has to leave. Galatasaray interested, working on this deal. At the moment, from Manchester United, many questions on Donnarumma and Man United. Man United made some call last week to understand the situation of Donnarumma. So Man United are informed about what's going on between Donnarumma and PSG, what Donnarumma wants to do, what's the request for his salary. Remember that Donnarumma is on a big salary, is more than 10 million euros net per season. Is 10 net per season plus add-ons. So the salary is a big one. Manchester United didn't activate a deal for Donnarumma, but let's see what's going to happen with all these cases, because it's still an open story. Man City have an interest, spoke to PSG, but at the moment it will depend on the financials of this deal and also of this.
Manchester United are exploring a move for Carlos Baleba, but are expected to have to pay a transfer record for an African player if they can persuade Brighton to sell the Cameroon midfielder. The 21-year-old has 3 years on his contract, which Brighton have an option to extend by 12 months. Sources close to Baleba have indicated he is keen to join United if an agreement can be reached. Brighton are adamant he is not for sale, and it would require an offer well above the 72 million Arsenal paid Lille for the Ivory Coast forward Nicolas Pepe in 2019 to tempt them into changing their stance. It may take more than 100 million to sign a player rated as one of the best emerging talents in world football. Any United bid for Baleba is understood to be dependent on players being moved on, with Chelsea still in talks over a deal for Alejandro Garnacho and Milan interested in Rasmus Højlund. They have been trying to offload two others attackers, Jadon Sancho and Antony, who are on big wages. United have spent more than $200 million this summer on the forwards Benjamin Sesko, Mateus Cunha, and Brian Mbeumo, another Cameroon international. Baleba, who joined Brighton in 2023 from Lille for $23 million, told The Guardian in March that he was happy at Brighton but said, "I want to be a big midfielder, to be a legend, across the world." Brighton's chief executive, Paul Barber, said last week at a fans' forum that United had yet to be in touch, but acknowledged Baleba could leave. "Carlos is a fantastic talent," he said. "We hope he'll be here for years to come, but it's subject to the dynamics of the football world, which isn't always predictable."